Listen to the people. Listen to humanity. Listen to the Parrot. Parrot TV. Parrot TV. Parrot TV. Parrot TV. Parrot TV. Listen to the people. Listen to humanity. Listen to the Parrot. Parrot TV. Parrot TV.
Do you know that there is a publishing company that wants to make life easier for you as a writer? This publishing company is called World Inkers Printing and Publishing. We publish in all different languages, and we're looking for writers of all genres, all formats. We're looking for scholars, ghostwriters, playwrights, poets, short fiction, novelists, you name it. We're looking for anybody who is interested in writing and the craft of writing to be in touch with us. You can reach us at info.worldinkers@gmail.com. With World Inkers Printing and Publishing, you do not require a lot of money to publish with us. Contact us today at info.worldinkers@gmail.com. Become a winner with other authors at World Inkers Printing and Publishing. Give us a shot. We will surely finish you. Welcome to World Inkers Network. I'm Dustin Pickering, your noble and honest host. And today we have Mela Blust on the show. Mela Blust is a moonchild that has always had an affinity for the darkness. She is a poet, a painter, a sculptor, and a jeweler. She has been writing poetry since she was a child. She currently resides on a small farm in rural Pennsylvania. Her work has appeared in the Bitter Oleander, the Sierra Nevada Review, the Nassau Review, and more. She is a contributing editor of Barron Magazine. Thanks for joining us today, Mela. How are you today?
I'm good. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. It's great to have you. This is the first time we've been face-to-face. I've followed your poetry for a while, and it's really excellent work. So my first question would be, are there any life observations that sort of drive your poetry in your new book that you just released?
I would say probably just the stark reality of life. Mm-hmm. I've explored a lot of lyrical concepts and artistic concepts in my work, and I think that this particular book was kind of driven by just the most basic, I almost want to say like the mundane reality that people don't necessarily pay attention to, that you just, you're in pilot mode and you just drive right by. And of course, with everything that was going on in the world and the pandemic, people had a lot of time to think. I had a lot of time to think. So I think that's really just me sitting and paying attention to the world.
So was this book, it's a book that's called Between Her Teeth. So it was basically, was it written all during the pandemic, or was there some poems that were previous to that, or how did it take, you think?
There might be 2 or 3 poems that I had already written, but largely these were written specifically for this book and in the last, I would say, 9 months to a year.
Excellent. Well, that's quite an accomplishment. I mean, it takes a while to put a book together, and I find that a lot of people don't actually go through that process. They sometimes shy from it, or they, want to do it and then they don't. I remember reading a quote recently that I think it was Mary Oliver said something to the effect of, "Those who are called to the creative life and don't follow it have the most regret." So I thought that was an interesting quote. So when you're throughout the composition of this book, I mean, what made you decide you wanted to publish the poems?
I guess I don't really ever decide that I want to publish. It's just, it becomes like in the process, it becomes obvious that it's going to happen because I tend to ruminate on a theme or a central topic, probably because that's just what's going on with me at the time, or what's going on in my mind or in my heart. And I just keep writing, and I don't really have a choice. I've often said that I don't write poetry, it writes me. So it's kind of like a curse.
Right.
And then I'll just keep writing, and then I'll notice that I have 40 or 50 poems that are all sort of focused on the same thing, and then it's very clear that they're a book. And that happens to me, I would say, once or twice a year. So I actually have 3 or maybe even 4 or 5 manuscripts just sitting in folders waiting.
Wow. So what does the title mean, Between Her Teeth? Where did you come up with that, and how does it relate to the poetry?
It's actually one of the poems in the book,
Mhm.
and I think it's a little misleading because it's actually about my dog.
Okay.
And I love that because when you read it, you know, people tend to perceive things in their own way. And so I guess a lot of times people might think that it's about me or about someone in particular, and it's actually about my dog. And I can read that poem if you would like.
You know, when I first heard the title, I thought it was like a tango, like you had a rose between your teeth or something. I thought that's what it meant. If you want to read the title poem, go ahead.
Yeah, so it's called Between Her Teeth. My dog looks at me incredulously as I scream at her to release the hen in her mouth. I understand now this is how we move differently in the world. To me, she is the beast. To her, she holds the beast between her teeth.
Wow. Interesting observation. I mean, it's like you're empathizing with the animal in that poem. That's really brings to life the characteristics of a dog, you know, and you know, the idea that you can sort of trade places and flip the switch a little bit. And I think that was very interesting, and it's an interesting thought that how different animals or different places, levels of evolution, I guess you could call it, you know, perceive things.
Yeah, I think that's a huge thing with me in writing is that I tend to almost enter the mind or enter the body of other animals because at the end of the day, we are all animals. We're just different animals.
Right. I agree, and I think it's interesting that, you know, how you can do that. I have the same ability sometimes. I get into the subject, I enter into the subject, and as I write poetry, and it seems to be like it becomes me. I had a discussion the other day about writing novels, and how, you know, those characters inhabit you and they just demand to be written. You know, do you feel that the poetry is kind of the same way? It's like it's something that just it comes and goes. You know, it's like you're not really in control of it. It's like a big ocean, and waves just come up, and sometimes they're big waves, and sometimes small waves.
Yeah, very much so. My writing process is not, you know, disciplined. I don't sit down intentionally a lot with the intention to write. I just don't really get a choice in it. I'll be driving or just thinking about something and a poem will start formulating in my head. And even if I try to ignore it, it's there, like it's in the back of my head, and pieces will just start coming, and eventually I have to write it down because it won't leave me alone. So.
Right. I remember hearing about Tom Waits saying that that's how his music came to him. Like it just kind of haunted him and just pressed him, and he had to create it in order to really make it happen, and, you know, to get it out of his head, I guess you could say.
Yeah.
So, of your poetry, which one do you like the best of all the poems? I noticed you posted one recently that you said was one of your favorite. Can you tell us a little bit about that one?
Yeah, I think it actually is my favorite poem that I've ever written because it's deeply introspective, but I think also really easy to relate to. And I got a lot of feedback. People commented it, several people shared it saying they really were very affected by it. And I wrote it because I was driving somewhere, and on the way there, I saw something that really, really affected me. And then on the way back, I saw it again, and it was different. And it was, again, during the pandemic, so I'd been isolated for a long time, and it just struck me very deeply. And I can read that poem to you if you would like.
Sure, if you have it on hand, you can read it.
Yeah, I do. So basically what happened was, you know, like I was talking about earlier, just noticing the natural world and animals and the way that they interact with the world. So this poem is called Lord, I Am Ready. Lord, I am ready to be a bird. I've navigated these lows so long with the aching desire to soar. In the low country hills, in the wash of spring, a dead groundhog is splayed on the pavement, his intestines a rosette of color on the algid gravel. My tires barely miss him. I issue a prayer in the rearview mirror, as I'm certain my mother has done for me over the years, watching me drag the baggage of myself across the verdant hillside of my home. In the rush of city traffic, I shrink to my smallest form, injured peregrine, white belly from months of isolation. I dive into the back roads towards home. The groundhog, having heard or not heard my prayer, still spills himself as an offering. A red-shouldered hawk perched atop his carcass, trying unsuccessfully to carry him away. And I wonder which one I am more like. The hawk, given brilliant wings but unable to fly, or the groundhog, offering his insides to the world, and no one able to carry them.
And I like how the structure of the way it flows from one space to the next in that. And there's definitely like a interaction between yourself as a person and how you relate to this this animal, this carcass on the ground, as you're passing it. Really interesting. I like the way you empathize so much with the natural world. That's really beautiful. And you live on a farm, I understand. And does that ever impact your writing, or how does that influence your work?
It does. I like what you said about how I empathize with the natural world. I think that's the place where I fit in the most.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't really classify myself as an introvert. I'm not. I'm very social and I'm very extroverted. But I think at the end of the day, my respite is coming back to this place where I live in the forest. There's no people, there's no cars, there's no traffic. I have chickens, turkeys, emus. The deer wander through the forest in the back behind my house. I live on a mountain and there's a creek running beside it. And I kind of can just really easily disappear into that and be totally at home and not need anything else in the world. And I think that's when I kind of write the most. And when I say write, I mean it's just in here because I'm communicating with the natural world, and that's where I feel the most at home.
Interesting. Do you have like a belief system that influences your writing, or like a system of thought? And that's not necessarily a religion or anything of that nature, but like a set of ideas that you work with frequently?
I mean, I'm deeply spiritual, but I'm not religious at all. I don't believe in organized religion.
Right.
So it's mostly just
Does that work explain your poetry?
I believe that a lot of my work is very spiritual, yes.
Yeah, absolutely. It had like we were talking about the empathy and empathizing with the natural world, and I think that's a deeply spiritual process. And I like to compare sometimes the whole world, like in general, the natural world, like, almost cannibalistic, but so like full of color and awe.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
inspiring.
It's anarchy and chaos, but it's also organized chaos, and it's absolutely beautiful.
Right. You have sort of like a scientific worldview to a degree.
Yeah, I think so.
So how does the love of darkness play into your work, as you said in your bio?
Well, I think that, I've noticed a theme that there are a lot of people moving around in the world and they're not in touch with their darkness, and they're not in touch with the darkness in the world. And I think that a lot of people would very much like to hide from it or pretend that it doesn't exist. And one, we all know that doesn't work. And two, I just think that the more in touch you are with the darkness, the more able you're more able to communicate with the light, because the two coexist and they can't exist without one another. And so I think that very early in my life, I was introduced to trauma, and some traumatic events affected my life. And it can go one of two ways. I've seen people who fell into their trauma and they never came out, and they describe themselves as being a victim. And I overcame my trauma mostly through cathartic writing and growth therapy. I did a lot of therapy, but I would characterize myself as not a victim, but a survivor. And so I'm able to touch back into that darkness and understand it and see where it is and how it's affected me in my life, but it's not all of me. It's just that I'm able to be in touch with it and able to speak to it. And so I draw from that a lot in my work. And I've definitely had people say that my work is very dark, and that's fine with me because some of it is light, some of it is dark. Those things coexist and they can't exist without one another.
Interesting. I don't think, like nighttime is very peaceful and deep, and sometimes it's cool and just something about it's like really serene. So when you think about, dark and night and interaction between the light and the dark, as you mentioned, I mean, and even Carl Jung, talking about the shadow, and if you're not in touch with it, it kind of starts to dominate your behavior, and in ways that you don't necessarily recognize. That's interesting. I think, is that like a self-realized or, observation, or did you read that and start to think about it? What brought you to that conclusion?
No, it was largely self-realized. I mean, I had a very difficult childhood and young adulthood. And then at some point I just realized that that wasn't what I wanted to define me, and I didn't want to live my whole life that way.
Right.
So I started seeking out things for self-growth, going to therapy, and just kind of diving in. And instead of avoiding the darkness or trying to get away from it, I dove into it and examined it and talked to it, which I think honestly helped me grow.
Did you write a lot of poetry during that period, with initial stages of that period?
I did. I've been writing my whole life. I started writing when I was about 5. My whole family is poets. My mom was a poet. My grandmother was a poet. My uncle Ike is a poet. I entered a poetry contest when I was 7, I believe, and I won first place. And that really just kind of gave me the momentum to keep going. And I just never stopped.
Interesting. So what are some interesting reactions you've had to your poetry that you personally relate to, or that you think were intriguing to yourself?
I've mostly gotten really good reactions, which is great because, starting out, I don't think I had a lot of faith that it was going to go anywhere. But it was something that I always wanted to pursue. And when I started submitting my work and really pursuing publication, I started being nominated for awards left and right. So there was a very good reception of my work. But I've also definitely had some instances where, I've been turned away from publications because they said that my work was too dark or too violent. I had someone review my first book and say that it was very depressing, which it is. And I understand that, but it was also almost humorous to me because absolutely it was depressing. It was literally the physical manifestation of my depression. So yes, it's depressing.
How would you manifest your depression physically in a poem? Did you create a character, or did you talk to it in some way, have a conversation with it through the poetry?
Well, no, I just mean the book is the physical manifestation of my depression. Everything in there was just me pouring out years of not being okay. And that's pretty much how I healed myself, is just getting all that out into the world instead of just holding it in.
So your latest chapbook, Between Her Teeth, when you started to write that, when did you realize you were creating a new book from that?
Well, I actually was just writing these poems, and I had posted a few of them online, and the 6 Foot Swells Press, Todd Cirillo from 6 Foot Swells, actually wrote me and asked if he could read a few more of them, if I would send a few more. And I did. So I sent him, I think, maybe 10 or 15 poems, and he really liked them. So he asked if I wanted to pursue publishing. And so that's when I kind of honed in and just really started focusing on that centralized theme.
Oh, okay. So when you write, do you think of a subject and write about it, or does it sort of just happen as you're writing? How does your process work that way?
It mostly just happens. I mostly am just kind of taken over by whatever's going on emotionally with me, or whatever I'm observing in the world, and it just comes to me, and I just write it.
What sort of feelings come over you when you feel like a poem needs to be written? Do you feel like a certain kind of impulse coming out of you some way, or is there any kind of thought process that leads to a poem?
It's basically urgency, which is why I always carry a notebook and a pen with me, because it's going to happen. And if I don't write it down, it almost, there's layers of things in my head that need to happen. And if a poem starts formulating in there, then it takes priority over everything else. And then I'm not able to really focus on anything until I get it out.
Interesting. It's for me, it's like I start writing, and sometimes I just feel like I want to write. I feel like an impulse, there's a depth that's wanting to come out. How does it, once you've written a poem, how do you feel after the fact, or written a series of poems? How does it make you feel about it?
Man, it's I think it's a sense of relief, but I think it's also this awe and this amazement, because I really feel like it's people talk about the muse, but I really feel like it's the world communicating through me, or the universe communicating through me. So it's kind of a sense of awe.
Absolutely. For me, it's like I don't know what it is. It just happens to me. We're going to take a brief break, but we'll be right back with some of Mela's poetry. Thanks for watching World Inkers Network.
I'm at that age where I appreciate every sunrise, sunset, and all the hours in between. The age that causes me to notice the rhythmic timing of each breath. A reminder to thank God for granting me another day. I'm at that age where joints begin to stiffen, and maybe I don't move as fluently as I did at 22. But I'm also at that age where I realize many didn't even get to see today. So I pray on bent and aching knee, thank you, God, for blessing me. I'm at that age where I notice my kids making some of the same mistakes that I did. And I remind myself that although never easy, I made it through, and so will they. I'm at that age where I understand that money never buys true happiness. But I'm also at that age where I understand it definitely does help to have a bit. I'm at that age where six-pack abs still attract. But I'm also at that age where the behavior of a true gentleman will stop me in my tracks. I'm at that age where I know what it means to be a woman, along with how to treat my man. Beginning with listening as he explains what he needs from me. You see, there may be many similarities, but all men are not the same. I'm at that age where I realize good things don't come to those who wait. They go to those who educate, plan, sacrifice, work, and repeat over and over and over again. I'm at that age where I appreciate spending time with family, whether we're on good terms or not. Because I'm at that age where I'm losing so many people that I care about. I'm at that age where I'm bearing down on that age where there are more chapters of my life in past instead of future tense. But I'm at that age where I refuse to give up. I continue to climb, to create, to improve, love, and share, bearing my soul to the universe while honoring my ancestors, my God, and myself, while becoming the best version of me possible, because I'm at that age.
The prisoner. I can still smell you on my pillowcase, in the comforter and sheets. Thought about doing laundry, but decided to keep you with me just a little while longer. Riding giants. Each new love affair is like standing in front of a 50-foot wave. It looked doable from shore. Gifts. The son of a bitch left me broke and blacked out, with a stripper's name written in black Sharpie on my forearm, 3 bright orange traffic cones in my bedroom, and a 2-day hangover. He is the best friend ever. Wishful thinking. We kissed once. It was on the corner of Rampart Street in St. Peter, New Orleans. I wish I could say it was that magic movie moment with the perfect song, perfect setup, lighting just right, and bright orange moon overhead. Anticipation giving way to action like the final scene in 16 Candles, when the 2 main characters are kissing on a table, birthday cake shining with lit candles in between, and nothing left to wish for. And when the credits rolled, everyone was already halfway home, satisfied and happy.
Welcome back to World Anchors Network. I am Dustin Pickering, and we have Mela Blust today, and she will read from her new chat book, Between Her Teeth, when she's available back on the show, that she is. So let's put her on, and let's get her to read a couple of poems from her latest chat book.
So, a lot of these poems are really a conversation with the natural world. So those are the ones that I'm going to focus on. This one is called I Ache. I ache for you like the hunter for his prey, knowing that some days will bring abundance and some will bring nothing at all. I yearn for you like a fisherman for his catch, patient, but still hungry. I am learning to leave desire alone, to observe instead of cultivate. My father used to tell me, troll the line to catch the fish, but we aren't in the same ocean anymore. These days, I let sleek bodies trail behind me without needing to catch every single one. Searching. When I was 4 years old, my mother took me blackberry picking. And as I leaned over the edge of the lake, an alligator's perfect ivory teeth rushed up from the ghost dark depths for a meal. I stumbled backwards in fear, narrowly escaping a premature death. I have never forgotten that image, but I remember thinking how beautiful he was. Years later, I glide through the Everglades in a canoe, throwing deli ham into the water for the gators. Still searching for beauty, just as dangerous.
Beautiful.
Thank you.
Empathizing with alligators. It's like a kind of like a strange thing to do. It's sort of a, an interesting little exercise. And I think it's really fascinating how you're able to sort of get within the spirit of creation, and kind of explore emotions through that route instead of like writing, I do this, I feel this. It's like you're really going into something else outside of yourself and coming back with some kind of like little gift to share with the world, like a little insight of some kind.
Yeah, I think that's one of the biggest ways to really perceive art in nature is to step outside of yourself.
Absolutely. Are you familiar with a writer named Diane Ackerman?
I'm not. No, I've never heard of her.
Yeah, she wrote for the New Yorker, and she was she's still alive. She's a poet and naturalist. She wrote a lot about nature as well, and she would go out and in the Amazon and see the piranhas and write about them and hang out with whales. I mean, it's really fascinating stuff. I think you'd like her. That's why I mentioned that.
That sounds like my dream come true, honestly.
Yeah. That's something I would love to do as well. And thinking of dreams, is there something that you would like to experience that you'd like to write about that you haven't yet?
I'm sure there's a million things that I want to write about and that I'm going to write about. But again, I don't really force myself to sit and write. I just let it come through me. And as far as anything that I want to do, I'm doing it. I decided probably about 10 years ago that I wanted to move out into the woods, live off the land, really get right with nature. Moved into a cabin in the woods, put a wood stove in, cut my own firewood, raise my own animals, grow food out of the land. That was always my dream when I was young.
Yeah, that's really interesting. It's like a lifestyle. When I was young, I wanted to be a writer as well, and I didn't really have any set plan as how I would go about it. It just kind of happened to me gradually. I just fell into it. And, I think for a writer, what do you think the strongest, need for a writer is? For me, it would be solitude, I think, in a lot of ways, solitude.
For me, I think that, I do agree that solitude is important. But for me, I think that my interactions with the world are kind of the food or the inspiration that gets made into whatever I write about. because I don't find myself really ruminating on people or current events. You know, I really shy away from the media, and I try to just largely ignore what's going on in the world, which doesn't mean that I'm not informed. It just kind of means that I choose to willfully ignore those things because I don't find that they have that much importance on my life. And I think that the world has gone too global and that we really need to focus on local. And, you know, if we spent more time tending our own gardens, they might be a little bit greener and we wouldn't search elsewhere so much. So really that's what causes me to write, is to be alone in nature, to see the way the world works when you're not fucking with it, you know?
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. You know, I think that one of the things that we went wrong with as a human race is trying to, instead of observe and enjoy, we want to make use of things. We look at things as for their use value, and the economy is all about profiting from the use of something. And I think that's probably one way we went wrong, is trying to, as you mentioned, you know, observe and enjoy rather than trying to, you know, so much mess with it, you know, fuck with it, as you said. The excellent way of putting it. And it's very simple, easy to understand concept that we, you know, Henry David Thoreau wrote about that, you know. So do you have any favorite writers of your own?
Oh man, those are hard to list. I read a lot of philosophy. I really like Soren Kierkegaard, Arthur Schopenhauer, Friedrich Nietzsche. And then as far as like poets, you know, when I was younger, I literally carried Walt Whitman's Leaves of Grass around in my purse and just read it. You know, and I wasn't really popular for that because there weren't a lot of people that related to that at all. But anymore, I think I really appreciate modern poets a lot more. Because they're doing new things and the conversation is fresh. And I think that, you know, we spend a lot of time reading old white dudes, and not that they don't have something to add to the conversation, but I think there's a lot more happening in poetry today that's of value. So I can't even list them all. I have a lot of poetry. I probably have about 275 poetry books and counting.
Wow. That's probably about my general spirit as well. I have hundreds of poetry books, and I love philosophy. You named some of my favorite philosophers: Kierkegaard, you know, Nietzsche, and you know, I love that. What do you think you've pulled from what they're writing? What have you learned from their writing, especially in regards to the craft of writing?
To look deeper, to examine everything. To be patient before you respond, to not have knee-jerk reactions, to examine the human condition, and to kind of put yourself in someone else's shoes and think about what they might be thinking and what their actions are before you just blindly react. I think I've learned a lot of patience from reading.
Right. I think of the feeling of virtue, you know, the idea that, you know, to be the best person you can be and exalt that, and instead of trying to chase after money or chase after what we call success, you know, you set your own terms and you live your life and you live as best as you can. You know, that's one thing I got from a lot of the philosophy I've read, is an emphasis on virtue. It's a very difficult discipline in some ways.
It is, and I think modern society has really gotten away from that. You know, I try really hard to be very optimistic, but it's bittersweet. I think I have a little bit of both pessimism and optimism. I don't know if you've ever seen the movie Idiocracy.
I've heard a lot about it, but I haven't seen it.
We should watch it. I think we've largely, as a society, gone in that direction, and it's a little depressing. So like you said, yeah, virtue, and patience and compassion and wisdom and kindness. Right. I think those get lost a lot. Yeah, and they're very important personally to me. It's wonderful, you know, these nuggets of wisdom that you find in philosophy, and you can find them in literature. You can find them in, you know, in every book. You know, it's like there's beauty in something that you can derive from it. So, what is something you're reading currently? That question always kind of toys with me because I'm always reading at least 5 books. So I'm currently reading probably 3 or 4 Ernest Hemingway and John Steinbeck books, and they're all on my nightstand, and I just kind of go back and forth between them. But I'm also reading poetry books all the time because I feel like if you're not reading, then how can you be a writer?
Well, absolutely. Yeah. So, what interests you in Hemingway and Steinbeck? You know, they're of the same generation. Is there like a historical reason, or did you just jump into their writing and like their
I
style?
remember taking classic lit when I was probably in ninth grade, and we focused a lot on John Steinbeck, Ernest Hemingway, O. Henry. And I remember that era being able to so starkly convey emotion. I don't know if you've ever read John Steinbeck's Cannery Row.
I think I've read some of that one.
It's
Yeah.
literally just a day in the life, or maybe perhaps a week in the life. And it just paints this extremely colorful picture of poverty and desperation and urgency and hunger. And he does that, John Steinbeck does that with all of his work. The Black Pearl, The Red Foal, like everything that he's ever written is so urgently emotional. And I really relate to that. I really relate to being able to have words written on a page that can cause someone to see something so vividly in their imagination and cause them to vividly stir up emotion. If a book can make me cry, I'm impressed.
Absolutely. So, is there any final words you'd like to impart to our viewers, of words of advice or encouragement, or just anything of that nature?
You know, somebody said this to me the other day, and it sounds so simple, but they said, if you want to be a writer, pay attention. All you have to do is look. Just look around. Pay attention.
Right. Would you like to give any shout outs or thank yous to friends and supporters, family, friends?
Absolutely. Thank you so much to Todd Cirillo, Julie Valin, and Matt Amat from 6 Foot Swells Press, who encouraged us, who made it, who created the cover. I'm really proud of it. And thank you to my family, my daughter, Rhea, my husband, Ed, who've always been my staunch supporters. My mom, who reads every one of my books and collects them. They've all been my staunch supporters, and it is much appreciated.
Well, thanks for joining us today. Well, hopefully, if you know anybody else who would like to be interviewed on the show, let them know to get in touch with me, and I'll definitely put them on here. We do these now on Tuesdays and Saturdays on Tuesdays at 2 p.m. and then Saturday 10 a.m. So we want to start doing them regularly instead of trying to move the times around. That was kind of difficult. But thanks so much for joining us today. It's been really pleasant talking with you.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Good luck with the book, and I hope it sells wonderfully well, and just keep up the poetry writing. And World Inkers Network, and I'm Dustin Pickering. We had Mela Blust today. If you have not subscribed to our channel, please do right now. And like, share, and love our content on Facebook and other outlets. And if you want to be on the show, you can get in touch with me at literarycorner at NewYorkParrot.com. And if you would like to help support us with financial donations, paypal.me/NYParrot. And remember that no donation is too small, from $1 to $100 million. That's the goal here. We need $100 million. Yes, that's exactly it. So if you want to be on the show, any kind of writer, any kind of creative mind, if you're an actor, musician, a ghostwriter, a poet, a biographer, anything you're doing right now and you want to talk about it creatively, we would love to have you on the show at Literary Corner at NewYorkParrot.com. Thanks for joining us, Mela, and thanks for you guys watching us out today, and keeping an eye on our show. Remember, this will be on Tuesdays at 2 p.m. and on Saturdays at 10 a.m. So if you've missed the show, go back and watch it. It's on me on YouTube. Thanks again, everybody, for watching. Subscribe to our channel and get to writing.
Listen to the people. Listen to humanity. Listen to the Parrot. Parrot TV.